Guys, let's read the Moonkin post. Let's give this some attention. Balanced Druid 11.0 feedback. As we approach the new expansion, Balanced Druid is receiving 2 new hero talent trees and a number of big changes to the spec. After having spent a good bit of time testing in alpha beta and discussing with members of the Balanced community, we wanted to provide feedback on these changes and examine whether they meet Blizzard's stated goals for the spec. Blizzard's stated design goals. Number 1, remove Pulsar. Pulsar, despite its powerful damage buff and Eclipse effects, constrained Balanced Druid's rotations and damage alignment timing due to its 40 to 45 second cadence. Additionally, they stated Pulsar punished downtime or intermission phases too heavily due to continued casting requirements. Number 2, talent variety. Increase build/playstyle variety by freeing up talent points and reducing the power of required talents. They also aim to add new talents that allow us to specialize in different damage types, dots, builders, or finishers. Key change in the community feedback. Number 1, removal of Pulsar. While removing Pulsar is welcomed due to the constraints noted by Blizzard, its absence without compensatory gameplay additions feels negative. Pulsar was integral to the spec's core gameplay and feel, unlike Rune of Power for mages. It wasn't just a constraint, but also one of the last things adding depth to the spec. Agreed. Actually. Pulsar replacement, grid alignment / orbital strike. The new choice node offers flexibility between 2-minute burstier and 3-minute more powerful / longer cooldowns, creating an interesting choice / build diversity, but will come down to proper tuning. Blizzard also noted their intention to make these cooldowns more powerful, but shorter in duration. This tuning has yet to be implemented, but would be a welcoming change. Yeah, so having the option to go with 2-minute cooldowns that are burstier is nice, but so far that is just not the case, right? The orbital strike that we have right now on beta is, yes, it is bursty, but it's nowhere near as bursty as real classes that have real bursts, right? So if they change that, if they buff Pulsar to be more orbital strike to be more bursty, then I do think it would be a really cool thing to be choosing between 2-minute orbital and 3-minute bigger like cooldowns, if they actually would implement it this way. Then, talent diversity issues. The existence of numerous 2-point talent nodes and passive talents is what significantly restricts build variety. Specifically, the 6 remaining 2-point nodes and their positioning hinder our ability to take some of the more interesting talents, leaving little room for meaningful decisions. Yep. There are 15 plus passive talents with minimal impact on gameplay, which makes the spec feel overly simplistic. Removing / reworking talents like Pulsar, Rattle the Stars, true, Stellar Flare, interaction with other parts of the tree, and replacing them with further purely passive talents has further reduced gameplay depths. Talents that add passive buffs to dots, generators, or spenders typically do not change our gameplay loop or add to it. We still want to keep up dots, generate AP, and spend it. Talents like Starlord, Balance of All Things, Fear of Balloon, New Moon, Starweaver, and so on. Examples of things that are either proc / passives that do add to some depth or are active buttons to manage. Yeah, this is very true, right? Because they are saying that they want to have builds that focus more on dots, builders, or finishers, but it really doesn't necessarily change our gameplay that much. Like, let's say our dots do more damage. That doesn't really change that much because we want to apply our dots no matter what situation. Like, there will never be a situation where we do not want to add dots, unless things die super quickly. But then we also wouldn't be playing a dot build. We're never gonna focus on our dots when we have mobs that die in 10 seconds, right? So if the mobs live long enough, or if it's single target or whatever, we're always gonna apply our dots. Therefore, a dot build wouldn't really change our gameplay necessarily. And also a builder / finisher build wouldn't change our playstyle necessarily, because just because our finishers do more damage doesn't mean we can cast more of them. And just because our builders do more damage also doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to cast more, because we still have to keep up our dots and we still have to use our Astro Power, right? The only time that a builder build would change our playstyle drastically is if we would not apply dots with the builder talent tree build, whatever, or if we wouldn't actually spend our Astro Power. But that would be weird, and that is literally against the basics of Moonkin, right? So I don't think we're ever gonna have a build, or at least not an intended build, where we either don't apply dots or where we don't spend our Astro Power. So therefore, having like so many things that don't interact with our gameplay a lot is true. It makes it very simplistic. Then, Astro Power generation. While this comes down to tuning, it should be noted that reductions in AP generation are generally not satisfying. Hero talents seem to help offset this, but the spec is generally more fun when resource generation is high. This is also something I very heavily agree with. And one of the bigger problems here is, I believe, that haste affects our Astro Power generation, because it creates a little bit of an issue where if our Astro Power generation is really high at the start of an expansion, then we will just keep gaining Astro Power generation the more stats we get, because if we get more haste and haste equals more Astro Power, then we might end up having literally so much Astro Power that we have a situation where we're like a Destro Warlock in Season 3 or Season 4 of Shadowlands, where all you do is spam Rain of Fire, because you cannot spend your shards as fast as you can press Rain of Fire, right? So that is an issue that can happen if we have a really high Astro Power generation at the start of the expansion. Now, Blizzard actually tried to fix this issue once by making our Astro Power generation not scale with haste as much. And what they did is like basically make our dots barely generate any Astro Power. Most of our Astro Power generation was our fillers, Starfire or Wrath, which then created like a really horrible playstyle where we didn't generate any Astro Power if we had to move or if we had to dot. So you would start a pack, you dot everything, and then you're still on 0 Astro Power. So you have to dot everything and then you have to cast like Starfire, Starfire, Starfire before you can even cast one Starfall, and that felt really bad. That was like Shadowlands. So then they fixed it. They gave us Shooting Stars and Solstice, and it fixed it a little bit. But yeah, now we have this issue that with too much haste, we might have too much Astro Power generation. Now, there is like a DR with Astro Power generation. Not a DR. Yeah, there is a DR. As long as they keep that in check, as long as we don't end up having too much Astro Power generation tied to our haste, I think it's fine to just increase the generation at the start of an expansion. Then, Hero Talents. Elune's Chosen. Increased AP generation and CDR interactions have been very fun to play with, but the visuals are lacking a bit. I agree. I do also think that the build is, like, not only the visuals are lacking, or maybe like they literally just don't exist, I guess. But I also think, yes, the AP generation is nice, but it also all seems very passive. Like, it literally feels like I'm playing the same thing with or without the hero talents, except I'm generating more Astro Power. The only thing that you can really play around is the CDR interaction, which is cute, but like, it's not like a major thing, right? Then, Lunar Calling feels restrictive / bland, especially in single target scenarios due to lower AP generation / higher casting of Starfire. Oh, that's the Starfire only build, yeah. Lunation versus Arcane Affinity. Lunation is very engaging to play with and ideally remains the pick in all scenarios versus the 3% damage increase of Arcane Affinity, which provides no gameplay. Yeah. Then, Keeper of the Growth. Thematically, this tree doesn't really resonate with the balanced tree community overall, it seems. It definitely doesn't. Making the Force of Nature model change into big ancients would at least make them look / feel cool to press. Agreed, yeah. It's actually true. I didn't even think about the fact that you could change the model of the Force of Nature. Why didn't they do that? Oh my god, I didn't even think about this. True. They did not even change the visual. Oh my god, that would have been the simplest change. Well, you still have to design them, obviously, so it's like, it's not that simple, but yeah. Selecting Keeper puts further constraints on the spec tree, as you now have to sacrifice a point in the bottom half of the tree to take Force of Nature in the top. True, assuming a situation where you take Starfall, yes. The gameplay focus of this tree being largely related to builders doesn't offer much depth whatsoever, as discussed previously. Trees as whole don't feel like a fun button to press either, yeah. Yeah, agreed. Any kind of spec where fillers are important, hate it. And we had this before. Most of Shadowlands, our fillers were really important and we had to press them a lot, and if we couldn't press our fillers, we were really shitty. This is just bad gameplay, because first of all, you get punished super hard for having to move. A lot more than Pulsar existing, in my opinion. And it's just really boring to just sitting there being like Wrath, 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 or like Starfire, 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 Starfire. Like, it's just boring. And yeah, trees are just not fun to press. Then, Eclipse System. The Eclipse System overall has become uninteresting and overly maintenance focused. Agreed. Previous changes allowing you to control which Eclipse you enter alleviated some issues but highlighted systemic problems. The constraints and focus the system places on entering / leaving Eclipse doesn't feel impactful anymore. After numerous band-aid fixes, it feels like the system has outlived its usefulness. Agreed. Please remove it. Mastery change / secondary scaling. Reductions in mastery value and crit scaling through Astral Smolder change are concerning as they may impede scaling through the expansion, increasing reliance on periodic buffs to remain competitive. True, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, this is actually very true. Defensive creeps, size squishiness. Balance druids have become significantly squishier relative to other specs, with more powerful and numerous defensive options. Shifting into bear form frequently for survivability is punitive and unenjoyable. Yes, thank you. Summary. Positive changes, removal of pulsar to open up room for other gameplay loops and talents, introduction of a few new talent choices and interesting here tree in Chosen Valoon. Negative aspect, lack of depth following pulsar removal / other changes during Dragonflight, continued reliance on restrictive 2-point nodes, excessive passive talents without depth, minimal defensive capabilities, Keeper of the Grove hero tree, and an uninteresting Eclipse System. I like that the Keeper of the the Keeper of the Grove hero tree is just like, the whole thing is just a negative thing. I like it. Action items, tuning adjustments. Ensure new talent choices are balanced to offer real gameplay diversity. Review and reduce 2-point nodes. Continue reducing the number of 2-point talent nodes to enhance build flexibility. Revamp passive talents. Introduce more interactive talents to replace passive ones. Defend a defensive review. Reassess balance through defensive ability to match the defensive capabilities of other specs. Yes. Eclipse System overhaul. Consider a more engaging system to replace the current Eclipse mechanic. Yes. To be fair, reworking the Eclipse System seems like such a big thing to do because it would require a lot of talent changes as well. So I kind of have a feeling they don't want to do that. I would want them to do it. Like, I would really want them to remove Eclipse, but that seems like a big effort. I appreciate you taking the time to read. You're welcome. And consider feedback for Senna. We're looking forward to the change. Side note, there's a major concern when playing Keeper of the Grove as it is close to damage neutral to only spam Wrath after stacking 3 Starlords in single target, even after capping Astro Power. This is likely not an intended gameplay loop, but is the result of too many talents buffing generators within the spec and keep it to Grove trees. I didn't even know that. So you can just sit there, spam Wrath, without even using Star Search. Well, that would be fun gameplay. I like it. So fun and engaging. Change do you think should happen to Boomkin? Well, all of this that we just read, what would happen without Eclipse? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. We already have our spenders, our Astro Power generators and spenders. Starfire and Wrath can exist without Eclipse, right? Because you can just say, hey, you press Starfire on AoE and you press Wrath on single target. Like, it's not that hard. You could have your Wrath sometimes buff your Starfire and the other way around. Like, there's quite a few things you could tactically do. Like, let's say if you cast Wrath, you have a chance to make your Starfire really strong. So you just press Wrath, and then sometimes you get a proc, then you press Starfire, you go back to casting Wrath. And it could be the same for AoEs. So let's say your Wrath has a chance to make your Starfire do a lot of like damage to the primary target, like a proc, and then you just press Starfire to give it a little bit more like variety. So you're not just sitting there pressing Wrath. You could say, okay, once in a while you press Starfire because it gets a buff. The same you could be the other way around. You could say, hey, on AoE you cast Starfire, but once in a while your Starfire buffs your Wrath and it makes it do splash damage. So once in a while you just press Wrath whenever you get a proc and you continue to casting Starfire, you know, like that would be like a simple thing. I'm not sure if that would be engaging enough. You probably need something else on top of that, but I mean, there's other things you can do. You don't need this whole Eclipse system, personally thinking. When you think about the damage profile that we have, we don't really have that many things that only do nature damage or only do arcane damage, right? Because the Eclipse system emphasizes the fact that we have arcane damage and we have nature damage. But the thing is, which abilities even do only arcane damage or only nature damage? Like, we don't even have that many. Most of our spells do astral damage, which is both nature and arcane. The only abilities that actually do arcane is Starfire and like Moonfire. I think that's it. And then nature damage is only Wrath and Sunfire and Mushrooms. But I don't think we need a whole system that like buffs nature damage when we really only have 2 spells that actually do nature damage. Because you're not really playing around that. That's the problem with the Eclipse system, I think. The fact that being in a certain Eclipse does not really change our playstyle that much. The only thing it does is that we press a different filler. Like if you're in Solar Eclipse, you press Wrath. If you're in Lunar Eclipse, you press Starfire. That's the only thing that is different. All of the other things are the same. So if the Eclipse would be more engaging, like if we had different abilities that we would press only in lunar and this one we only press in solar or something, then that would be maybe more interesting, but we don't have that, right? The only thing that the Eclipse determines is which filler we cast, which is pretty fucking boring. Like